Hello everyone, it's Viz again. Uh, Decided to make another one of these controversial slash counterintuitive strategies or tricks for free for all. Part two, because I did think of some more things. Um, I figure some of this may overlap with things I've said before, but it's still, still needs to be mentioned. And hey, there may even be a part three because I'm slowly, rewatching old replays and playing games and just slowly remembering things that I realize are these are effective strategies that I use. They might not seem that way if you're thinking about it and you haven't used it before. It's just things I've learned over the years. So, first one on this video is secluded new main base slash decoy main. So yeah, your starting main base can certainly be important, but only if you make it so. A lot of times I plan to make a new main in a different, more secluded location or harder to get base or harder to reach base with a lot of building area in it. Because, if you think about a main base, everyone knows where that is. If they looked at the map, they know where everyone's main should be. So that's automatically a target on everyone's back, presumably from the start. So good examples of these kinds of bases are corner expos or large island expos. Especially the large island expos. If a lot of island expos aren't generally big enough to have a whole main on them, but some maps will have big islands that are just great for this. So I will a lot of times depending on the map, I will intentionally not build too much at my quote main spawn base, and I'll preemptively build up my tech and production and my supply in this new main base. And of course, this is very map dependent. Um, I'll usually only do it on bigger maps. Smaller maps, you can't really do this very well. It just doesn't make sense to, because smaller maps, it's much harder to hide on those maps, so it's not quite as viable or practical. And next portion of this is I just talked about doing it preemptively for defense reasons. Um, but the next portion is to be nomadic, and you should always be gravitating towards minerals, always. Um, which might mean that if you can afford to, like I said above, be prepared to set up a new main or a second main in an area with more minerals remaining or a lot of minerals remaining that haven't been touched, or an area you think might have minerals remaining based on the rate people are mining their current bases. And you just use your old main as a decoy main and let it die. Unless, of course, that's way too much on it to lose. And sacrificing your main in order to gain a positional advantage can be great. Like, it's a distraction while you get set up in a new area with a better mineral supply. You can always just mine those minerals, and you're already set up there. Assuming they don't necessarily know that you're there or trying to set up your new area there. And again, this sort of strategy is not really ideal if your main has too much in it to lose. Like if you just have way too much production or way too much tech and supply there, you can't really abandon your main. But if you do it right, like not making your main so important, it can definitely be a positional advantage. It'll just allow you to be more nomadic, move around, set up a new main in a better spot. Um, Another way I mean positional advantage is in this case when your main dies, it can trigger that player or other players to think you're weaker than you are, and they just might leave you alone. They'll see, oh wow, this guy just killed Viz's main. He might not be all that strong, and you can just resituate a new main closer towards an area of the map with more minerals, and it will give you better position going forward to just collect them and defend while you do it. Next up, punishing greedy players such as myself in the right situations. So greedy players' biggest weakness is early aggression, of course. Or, I mean, realistically, any kind of constant aggression can be hard for a greedy player to deal with. We play greedy because generally going for early aggression or just being super aggro in general can be a losing strategy. Unless, of course, the map calls for it. I mean, you have to remember, everything is situational. Sometimes, depending on what the map is, it might make sense to be aggressive early on. So nothing I say is 100% law every time. Like, it always varies based on maps, the players, just what's going on. And on maps where greedy players may think they're safe, hitting them with a well-timed attack to just get them out early, or make them fight and make them get behind or slow down, it can work really well. Just make sure that if you're going to do that, just make sure you do kill them. And I guess hunt them down, really. Really clear that area out. You don't want them to be coming back with anything. And it is controversial in a way because it can put you behind. Any early aggression can put you behind in free for all. But if it works, you have more ground to work with. You eliminated a strong player early. You don't have to deal with them, presumably. But if it fails, you're going to be dealing with that player for a long time. And you're already going to be weak because going for an early aggression build generally doesn't have you with the best macro setup. But yeah, and also you generally don't want to do this cross map only with neighbors. Killing a cross map player puts you in a much more vulnerable position, even more so than if you did this with a direct neighbor. Next, supporting weaker / injured players in their mining efforts. So this one I think is very counterintuitive. So I do not mean an alliance. I mean, if you see a weak player with no real shot of winning the game, if you see them mining minerals that are not necessarily in your territory, and it's an area of the map you might not necessarily be able to easily access or defend, do what you can to support that player indirectly for as long as you can while they just soak up those minerals away from a nearby stronger player. A lot of times this can just mean simply leaving them alone. Like, you see their base, just don't hurt them. Just let them mine it up. Leave them alone completely, so they're the ones having to fight the other players who want it. And if they're strong enough to do so. And other times it can mean putting pressure on those enemies who are trying to steal that base from them, which will help give the weaker player extra time. It'll buy them some time to make those minerals go into their bank, which will ultimately be useless, assuming they're actually a weak player or they're actually weak. If the player is not really all that weak, then you're going to have to play it differently. You're not going to want to just let them have it. It all depends on the map. It all just depends. Everything depends. Everything in free for all just depends. And you may think, well, why not just kill that player and take the minerals for myself? And of course, that is also an option. And sometimes that might be the best option. It all just depends on the map. Assess the situation for yourself. It just all depends on what's going on. And if you think you'd be able to wipe that base out and mine it for yourself without any trouble, or having it bite you in the ass in the future, or without losing more minerals than it's worth, then go for it. Otherwise, it may just be easier to let that weaker player mine those minerals and help them do it in a way where you're not really allied to them, but you're facilitating them mining those minerals, making those minerals go into their bank, and they'll presumably die with those minerals in their bank, having done nothing. And those minerals do not go into the bank of the stronger player you're worried about. Next, let others do your dirty work. This one's pretty, not necessarily counterintuitive. This is kind of obvious, but it is controversial in a way that people might think you're playing a very boring or cowardly style, but it is realistically the winning way to play. So letting others do your dirty work is the natural result of playing positionally, like playing good positional play or playing passively. Like this is the direct result of if you're positioning right and playing passive, which I've talked about before. So positioning yourself in or swiftly killing anyone who prevents you from positioning yourself in such a way that you're really not anyone's natural enemy is important. Not taking certain bases that would make you someone's natural enemy important. It allows other players to fight each other more easily. So they're doing the dirty work. They're wasting their own minerals. They're using up their resources and busying themselves with each other while you stay out of the way and you build up. Presumably not fight anyone. You might have to fight your own fight as well, but if you're able to wipe them out quickly, then you of course you're at an advantage. Well, you want to be eliminating your natural enemies as quickly as possible if you have them and if you have to. And lastly, fortify your production/supply, especially when you have a very large bank. That's just an arbitrary 20k plus. I don't really. That's just a guess. Maybe you could do this with 10. I don't know. It really just depends. I think 20k plus is a good benchmark for this. So this one's very important on big maps with lots of minerals or a decent amount of minerals. You have a lot of money to spend, so you might as well spend it. It's crucial to be able to defend your main base with minimal supply usage as possible. Sunken spores, cannons, and turrets are all zero supply. I mean, they cost minerals, but they're all zero supply. And they really need to be used on these big money maps, or these huge map. Not big money like big game hunters. I mean, like a normal big free-for-all map with lots of bases. And this very much goes hand in hand with the secluded main thing I talked about at the start. So, as an example, so of course, mass sunkens, spores, and I would say lurkers, defilers, just surrounding your tech and hatcheries. Of course, lurkers are what, 2 or 3 supply? I think 2 supply. I don't know, 2 or 3 supply, however much they are. Defilers 2 supply. I mean, yeah. After you, I like to do this after I've done, especially after I've done all the mining I have to do. I'll bring all those drones back to my main, build a massive amount of sunkens and spores if I have the money to do it, and get a few lurkers in choice spots, at least like 2 or 3 defilers around, ready to plague mass air or ready to swarm the lurkers. Swarms over lurkers. Amazing. I don't have a figure for how many lurkers you should have. Really just depends on, choke points and how many sunkens and spores you have. Just tinker with it, whatever makes sense. T for Terran. You want to be walled off, ideally. Mass turrets, mass tanks on ledge, maybe science vessel or two, and even better, flying buildings over your tanks for even more defense against, like, mind control or broodlings. Um, Tanks are really the big one here. And use the balance with how much supply you're using. Um, Tanks are what, two supply. So even just like 12 tanks, which is probably even less than I'm thinking would be ideal. But say maybe like 30 to 40 supply of tanks at your main gives you a good 150 plus of army elsewhere, um, to just use. And Protoss, this one's probably the strongest one, the best camping race, I think, is Protoss. So this one's obvious: mass cannons all around, with storms, with the energy upgrade. So they get 3 storms with that. At least a couple arbiters. All of this surrounding your gateways, stargates, tech. I like to do, if you have like a ramp, I like to do like 1 or 2 Dark Templars on the ramp. And as an even bigger FU, have an arbiter right there ready to stasis them if you think you're going to need it. Stasising units on ramps is it just turns that base into an island pretty much, unless they know how to like do some weird trick to get past it, like with vultures, mines. Usually you're not going to be able to do that stuff with a massive amount of cannons on the ledge. So yeah, having stasis units on a ramp, great. um, Dark Archons, of course, ready to mind control anything that comes near. Um, High Templars are what, 2 supply? Yeah, at least 3 or 4 of them ready to storm any mass air. Arbiters there ready to stasis carriers or stasis whatever you need. You can just fend off, like you can stop an entire carrier army with just a couple arbiters, a couple storms, and some dark archons. Maybe, let's say, 3 stormers, 6 supply, 2 arbiters, 3 arbiters, however many supply that is, like 12. Dark archons are what, 2, 3 supply, 4? Shoot, I don't even know. You could have maybe, say, like 40 supply, 30 to 40 supply of army at your main. It's all surrounded by cannons. Fend off a maxed army, maybe, or at least hold it off for long enough that you'd be able to get back to your main with your main army. Because Protoss units, especially in this late game, these spellcasters are just so effective. They can just hold off a massive army, like a Zerg ground army. A max Zerg ground army is not going to be able to break mass cannons and even just a small amount of spellcasters. It sucks, but it's true. Unless the Zerg player is very good and they get drops, they get guardians, it's just hard to break a Protoss camp like this with these spellcasters, and I'm sure you've seen it so many times in free for all, because I'd say at least a decent amount of people know that this is the way to play it. If you do it right, it's just so hard to beat, because you just have that low supply usage holding off an entire army while your main army does whatever the hell it wants. So these are all low investment in supply, extremely cost effective ways to defend your main base while your army is away, because that's when theoretically you're most vulnerable. And if you have a huge bank, you do not want to be losing your production. You don't want to be scrambling to set up a new base or new production. I mean, you can afford to do it, but it's not ideal. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll have some more vid reps coming soon. Hopefully, some of which will highlight all of the things I've been talking about, all these concepts, so you can see them in action and see how effective they can be when used right. So stay tuned and have a good night.